Good morning and welcome to the EZFX Trading Room broadcast for Tuesday, November 15th, 2016. My name is Bradley Freed, and for the next 20 to 30 minutes, you'll be joining me for a review of our watch list from yesterday. We're going to be going through each of these currency pairs and trade setups and giving you updates on where we're at with the trades, which ones are open, which ones are still watching, which ones have been eliminated, and any new trades that have appeared in the interim that you should be aware of. I did send out 3 signals yesterday: a dollar peso sell, a New Zealand dollar buy, and an Aussie yen sell. And so I'll be updating those first. But if you have any questions, I have a chat room on this page. If you're watching live, you can post your question to the chat room. I'll answer it at the end of the broadcast. If you are watching this recording, please send me an email at ezfxsignal@gmail.com. You can use the link at the top of this page to go to the trading room group and post your question, post your chart, post any information or ideas that you have to share with our other members. Or you can go to the community menu, find members, find me, I'm EZFX, and you can send me a private message via the website. So without further ado, let's get started with our signal trades. So I sent out an Aussie yen sell. Remember, this pair had retraced quite a bit yesterday, so I went ahead and sold it right about here. It's gotten close to this previous zone where it fell. The triangular moving average has turned blue again, so we're still looking at a potential continuation of a buy trend. However, I see this as signs of weakening. We had this huge dip and recovery after the election, then we had a dip again. It's made a lower high here. If that lower high holds and this drops, we could see it at least get to the weekly pivot down here. That's this week's weekly pivot at 80.1003, which is our current weekly pivot this week. And we would take partial profit there and move to the south break even. Final profit target on this, of course, is the monthly pivot. Also a very reliable pivot target. All of these are fairly close within the context of the trade space. So I think they're fairly easily attainable, provided that we do see this confirmed as a lower low and we get a breakdown. So the Aussie yen sell is currently open, and it is a signal trade. I'm differentiating signal trades with 2 asterisks. I'm going to clean that up because it kind of got confusing yesterday. So I'll make sure that we only have asterisks by signal trades by the end of this broadcast. New Zealand dollar, I also bought this. I talked about these yesterday. We've gotten back after dropping fairly quickly to this previous Class A demand zone. And when we hit this, we expect to see a reaction to the upside. We did see a breakout as we approached it. We've gone back down to the low attained before we took the entry on the signal trade. So this is a little bit in the red right now. Our initial profit target on this is the monthly pivot at 0.717. Our final profit target is the weekly pivot at 0.7263. That's last week's weekly pivot. And that's what we're still going for. I'm hoping this is going to bounce again. We do have a buy bubble here, which is a significant precursor for reversals. Yesterday I was having trouble drawing ellipses. Let's see if I can get one today. That's a pretty one. So I'm just going to mark this buy bubble right here. If this buy bubble curls up and we get a complete hook of the buy bubble back over the triangular moving average line, plus we get a bounce off this demand zone, I would expect this pair to finally rise and at least get to our initial profit target at the monthly pivot at 0.7170. So the New Zealand dollar buy is also currently open, and that is a signal trade. And you can still get in that, actually, because it's approached this low again. So now is an opportune time to get in it. Next, we have a dollar peso trade. This is our 3rd signal trade. This was moving up here yesterday, and I went ahead and took it because it was close to this Class A zone. It gave us a pretty good stop. Still fairly large. I mean, it's a 500 pip stop, so you have to really trade a small trade size on that. Initial profit target is 832. Final profit target is 2014. So these are fairly large moves, but with an appropriate trade size, this pair has a propensity to move and hit all those things as it goes back to the previous supply or demand zone. So this has moved quite a bit in our direction. We're about halfway to the first target at the weekly pivot at 20.0705. I'm continuing to keep this trade open, and I'll keep you updated on its progress. So the dollar peso is also open. And this is, you can't get in this anymore because it's moved too far, but it is an open trade. All right, moving on, let's look at some of the other things that presented themselves. We have dollar Swiss. This, I drew a trend line yesterday. I've redrawn this trend line. It's made a new high here. So it's still trending in the buy direction, but we do have a nice trend, and it's hit at 1, 2, 3 places. So we have a meaningful trend line under price. When we do get a breakdown signal, then there are several pivot targets below we can target. Right now I'm still watching this though. So I want to make sure the dollar Swiss it's a sell trade, but it's something we're watching. Not ready to take a trade in this pair yet. Dollar yen. The dollar yen is also continues to trade. It recently made a higher high. This is not breaking down yet. It's still trending in the buy direction. A very similar trend to the one we saw on the dollar Swiss. So we're seeing a lot of this weakness in other pairs versus the dollar post-election. And if I draw a perfect trend line where I hit 1, 2, 3, 4 points hitting this line, then I know I have a meaningful line. So a setup and then a close beneath this line in the future would be a high probability trade setup. And I'll be wanting to trade this in the sell direction when that happens. But as for now, this pair continues to trend in the buy direction, and it's a trade we're watching, not trading. Pound yen. This is another trade I like very much. It actually dropped and then it's retraced a little bit back towards the Class A supply zone up here that triggered this initial drop. It moved through this, it broke through this initial trend line. You know, if we'd drawn another trend line, it probably would have been under price for several points here. It broke below that. It's returned up there. This may go higher. You know, we're seeing the dollar yen trending higher. We're seeing these other pairs versus the yen trending higher. So the pound yen may do that also, but the pound has a real weakness. So you can either get into this and try this at a very favorable risk to reward ratio with this stop. So like if you got in right now, you could get into this for a 74 pip stop. Initial target at this week's weekly pivot at 274 pips, final at the weekly pivot below at 610 pips. Pretty good setup. I would tend to be careful though, because we've had a small demand zone appear here, and those tend to portend stop out. So if I was actually in a trade here and I saw this appear, I would want to go ahead and loss cut or take profit on this trade and get out, because this tends to mean that price is reversing. It's a very reliable signal. So I would not get into this just yet. I'm going to set this pair. If we don't have it, yes, a pound yen sell is also still watching. And I would look for this actually to break through this zone and make a higher high and maybe set up a trade up here. Again, at one of these other supply zones higher up, and then we'll give it a try again. But I'm not ready to trade it right now. CAD yen. This is another pair that was trading pretty nicely. We drew a nice line under this yesterday. We had these wicks poke through again and again, but it never really broke down. And it made a new high. So this is still trending in the buy direction like the other yen pairs. You see a theme here? I sure do. And this means that we're not ready to take a risk in selling this trade. I did have this as a new trade in our watch list. I'm going to move this back up to the watching section because I don't think there's enough here to think about imminently getting into a trade on this pair until we see a setup in the sell direction, and we see that confirmed with movement on the other yen pairs in our list. The CAD, this is also trending to the downside. I just drew a trend line about this. I don't know if this is on our list or not before, but I'm going to put this on our watch list for a buy trade. I think it will produce that in the future. It's just a matter of when. We'll just keep an eye on it. Nothing much to say here except I could draw a nice trend line. It's moved fairly low. It's hit these previous lows back here. If we shrink the chart, we can see that right now it's right at a pretty important support level. If it breaks that and goes to the monthly pivot, it could go even lower. But the next move we'd be looking for is a fairly nice buy trade, back up to this weekly pivot and back up to this supply zone where this drop was initiated. Pound Aussie. This is one that actually opened up. This is an open trade. We were kind of looking for retracement yesterday on this. We didn't get it. It's retraced a bit now. So, but it's still a pretty large stop. So if you were setting a stop on this, it's 262 pips right now. If you got in right after it dropped and closed below this trend line here, you'd still be looking at about a 245 pip stop. So you have a very small trade size on this pair. Initial profit target is a 50% Fibonacci level with a final profit target at the monthly pivot at 1.6074. And this pound Aussie trade is now open. And it's not a signal trade. Pound Newsy, very similar to the pound Aussie. This had dropped fairly significantly. I was looking for a retracement back up to the zone to get a more smaller stop and a better trade size. It did not give us that. It approached the weekly pivot and it's retracing a bit with these other pairs. I don't expect to be able to get in it. Really, your entry opportunity on this pair would have been a trend line break somewhere in here to confirm. But the best confirmation of all really was just the appearance of this new Class A supply zone. So you would have gone ahead and sold it down here, even though the stop might have been rather large. And it wasn't too bad. It was actually 142 pips or 150 pips right about then. Initial profit target at the weekly pivot at 224. Final profit target is the monthly pivot at 560. Let's just say 570 probably. And that trade is currently open. So pound Newsy sell. Pound CAD, this also set up. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. It didn't retrace up for us, but it did keep moving down. So as soon as this Class A zone appeared and you had a sell bubble too, then you could have gotten in this trade, say down here with a required stop 177. Initial profit target at, let's see what we have under here, the weekly pivot from last week. Final profit target is the monthly pivot. This is very similar to the other setups we talked about. So the pound CAD is also open and not a signal trade. To be clear. On Swiss, this has actually given us a second chance to get in it. It's still a pretty large required stop, but it dropped. We got a Class A zone, triangular moving average, color change, and we're also looking at a required stop about 94. At this point, this is something that's still potentially on the table for an entry. So I'm going to put this as a new trade for us. And that's looking pretty good right now. And so that's the pound Swiss. We're looking at that as a new trade. And that's something I want to keep an eye on, actually. That's one that I may want to get into in the near future. And the pound yen to some degree, but the more I look at it, the less I want to get into it, the more I think it's going to go higher. So I'm just going to set that aside. The yen seems to be weakening across the board against these other currencies. So I'm just going to leave that alone. Let's go to the euro yen. This is also continuing to trend higher. We're not getting a breakdown. Like the other yen pairs, the yen is weakening against all these major currencies. So this is not something we're going to trade right away. I had it as a new trade. It actually did stop out if you'd gotten in that trade on a trend line break here. I've drawn a new trend line under price just to kind of get ready and when a new setup appears to assess it and see if we want to trade it. But we would have taken a 55 pip loss on that initial entry given the stop that we set. And then I'll just put it back up in the watch list portion. So I'll be watching for a euro yen sell to set up again. Euro Swiss, this is one we've been watching. This actually set up and started for us. It's moving towards the pivot. It hit the weekly pivot. It's kind of stuck there, but if it can break beyond that, then it could get to last week's weekly pivot where our initial profit target is at 1.0808. So that's kind of what we're waiting to see if happens now. We do have a new supply zone starting to appear here. That could be a reversal signal, or this could just be something that appears for a few moments, a few candles, and then gets punched through and disappears. I tend to think that's what's going to happen. It just looks that way to me, especially because we have all these other things going on, like a triangular moving average color change here. All those kind of confirm to me that this is going to continue to trend in the buy direction. So the Euro Swiss is currently still an open trade, but it is not a signal trade. So I'll go ahead and take the marks off of that. Pound dollar. This is another one that started. Really, it started with this gap down here and this Class A zone that appeared. And you could have gotten into it at any point, but and the stop at this point would have been about 120 pips, so that's doable. Initial profit target at the 50% fib level is 183. It's greater than 1-to-1, perfect. And then a final profit target down here at the monthly pivot at 1.2273. So the pound dollar is also sell trade, and it's currently open. Euro Newsy, this isn't really doing anything for us right now. Euro Aussie, same thing. Aussie CAD, wow, that just fell off the face of the earth, didn't it? Euro Pound. Euro Pound, this looks like it could be setting up a buy trade at some point. It's fallen quite a bit with some signs of reversal. Not nearly enough for me to want to trade it right now, but do be aware that there's a buy bubble here. And if I saw some other things, some other confirming factors, I might consider buying this pair. So let's go ahead and put it on the watch list anyway. Euro Pound buy. Dollar CAD, very similar kind of thing. We have this pair has dropped, Class B zone. It's dropped, it's hit and created a Class B demand zone. It looks like this wants to drop down to the weekly pivot. If you got in right now, 73 pip stop, 57 to the target, which isn't enough, so you'd want to go to the next weekly pivot at 121, final profit target at the monthly pivot at about 232. But dollar CAD sell, this is also, I think, available to you. Aussie dollar, no. Swiss yen, no. Euro dollar, no. Aussie dollar, we already looked at. Just to make sure I didn't forget anything, but we do have quite a few pairs that have set up for us that I'm very interested in trading and following. The New Zealand yen sell, that's open. It's also still a new trade. It's returned back to the supply zone completely. So you can get into this at a fairly good risk to reward ratio. If you got in right now, the distance to the stop would be 93 to the last week's weekly pivot, 130. This week's weekly pivot, 106. So you could still have 1-to-1 at this week's weekly pivot. Very nice high probability target. Final profit target at last at the weekly pivot 3 weeks ago for 219, or if you want to be a little bit more aggressive, the monthly pivot for 259. So the New Zealand yen is also, I'm going to call this new. I'm going to put it at the top of the list just so it's more visible, because this is something you should be aware of. It looks like it's a good opportunity for sell trade. If you haven't done the Aussie yen, if you've done the Aussie yen, I don't think you need to do the New Zealand yen. I think pick one or the other, because it's basically the same trade and you're concentrating risk in a very similar pair if you take both of those. That's just my personal opinion. I've always kind of believed that. So, if you have a different idea, please listen to yourself, but that's my opinion. So let's see what we haven't covered in the list here. We talked about, okay, dollar Swiss sell. Been watching this one. That's still watching. Euro dollar yen, pound yen. We're still watching all of those. CAD yen sell. We talked about that. This is still trading higher, so we're still watching that. Aussie CAD buy. Still trending lower, so we're starting to watch that. Euro yen sell. We just talked about that. Still trending higher, so we're looking to trade that again. Euro pound buy. Just find this pair real quick. This is dropping lower, and we were looking at a 4-hour chart, but let's move to the 1-hour chart. And you can see it's already started to turn. We sort of have a class B plus divergence situation here, a buy bubble, and it broke out and then it's dropping lower. So this is something that you could buy. I'd actually call this a new trade. And if you put your stop here, then you can target probably a 50% retracement level, and also the monthly pivot would be good natural targets for this. But I'm going to go ahead and put this as a new trade. And probably at least one of these, I'm kind of keep an eye on it, and I may send out as an additional signal for you guys this week. The Aussie dollar buy, we did look at that. Sorry if I'm repeating things. I just want to make sure we get to this whole list. And we do have a big list this week. A lot of things starting to move in our direction, setting up trades for us. Yeah, we're still watching this. This made a new low. It broke through this stop here. I think it's going to keep trending. These dollar things just keep trending. But we're still looking for a buy trade in the future. Pound Aussie sell. Pound Aussie sell is open, so I'm going to take it off this list. We've already moved it down there. And the euro dollar buy trade. Haven't talked about that yet, I don't think. Let me just apply a template here and we'll see. Yeah, this is still dropping, so I consider this to be something that's going to be setting up in the near future, but it isn't there yet. So I'm going to say we're going to leave this on the watching list for now. That gives us all our updates. I would be focusing on these 4 trades if you haven't already. We have our signal trades, but these are the new trades I like the most: euro pound buy, New ZN cell, dollar CAD cell, and pound Swiss cell. And probably at least one of those I'll be sending out as a signal a little later, probably within a few hours. So we'll just see how they develop, and when I think I'm ready, I'll go ahead and share that with you by email. That's it for our updates today. I'll just check and see if we have anybody attending live. If we don't, then we're going to go ahead and end this broadcast. And we don't. If you have any questions, you can always send me an email at ezfxsignal@gmail.com. I was happy to get your questions and answer them. You can also go to the trading room group by clicking on this link. You can post to the group, you can post charts, you can post questions, you can post ideas, and myself or another member of the EZFX community will be looking forward to interacting with you and hearing about your ideas and trying to answer your questions or share information. You can also go to the community menu, members list, find me, I'm EZFX, and you can send me a private message. So there's 3 ways to get into contact with me. I always try to answer your questions within 24 hours if I can. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, especially on a weekend. So bear with me, but your questions are very important to me, and I encourage you to ask any questions that you have. Remember, there's no dumb questions, only dumb answers, and I'm completely responsible for the dumb answers. That's our trading room for today. Thanks for attending or watching this video, and I'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the EZFX Trading Room. Take care and happy trading. See you tomorrow.